Hello and welcome to Sidekicks, the weekly cybersecurity podcast hosted by Richmond Advisory Group's principal analyst, that's namely me, Rory Duncan.
And me, Christina Richmond. This podcast is your go-to partner for understanding the cybersecurity market, industry trends, and the real-world challenges of protecting organizations today. I wanted to interrupt you as you were doing your intro and say, the melting Rory Duncan.
Yeah, the melting Rory Duncan. So, folks, I've turned the fans down. I've got one on one side, one on the other. So hopefully there's not too much noise or interference. But here at the Sidekicks Command and Control Center, it is hot. It is boiling. I am in a pair of shorts. I am bare-chested, full disclosure.
Oh.
And
I didn't know you were going to come out with that.
Oh, yeah, listen, and it is absolutely hot here.
Thank goodness.
I think, the world's coming to an end. We're doomed. The humidity is off the charts. It's like Miami in Scotland, which is just terrible. So,
and Scotland has come to Miami. The Tartan Army has been in Miami, and before that, Boston. So they're getting a dose of the same humidity and heat that you're experiencing at home.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, and folks, this is after the 3-0 defeat last night that Scotland had against Brazil. But hey, it's against Brazil, and it could have been a lot worse. Let's just put it that way.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay. I'm sure they drank all of the beer in Miami after that.
Yeah, that's right. Very much. Oh, probably before, but never mind. So, Christina, what have we got on the show this week?
Yeah. So before I get to the show, I'm just going to say the newsletter's coming out today. I have no idea what it's about. Mm-hmm. We do have a paper in the works on services as a product, so it might point to that. Mm-hmm. I might do a callback to some really fun podcasts. Like we loved the Geordie AI podcast, so maybe a callback to that. So, it'll be dealer's choice, and stay tuned for that. It'll come out later today. And what's on the show this week? Oh, I thought you picked some really good stories this week. I was going to mention the FortiBleed credential harvesting attack to you several days ago, and then I forgot because, white hair, what can I say? I forgot. But the other one that you're pointing out is SailPoint's acquisition of Entro, which gets them into the NHI space. So I'm looking forward to us discussing both of those. Yeah,
that's right. And we also have a guest this week. This week's guest is Brandon Dobrek, who is the VP of Product at SecurityScorecard. So we look forward to having a chat with him about that.
Yeah, I really am interested in his answer to our softball question. Because in that space, and we just covered GRC as a special episode of the podcast, a month ago? Yeah. We went through GRC and we talked with both CyberSaint and with IBM. Mm-hmm. And now we'll get to hear SecurityScorecard, not directly, in terms of what they do, but a perspective from someone who works there, that'll be interesting to see if that keeps them up at night.
Great. Let's go into the news then. Let's do a couple of news stories, Christina, now that I've remembered to unpause the recording. So apologies.
Yes, that's always a good thing to do.
It's probably a good thing to do. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of silence in a very short episode. So M&A. M&A is a popular topic for folk who are listening to our podcast, and there's been a little bit this week. So SailPoint has acquired Entro in a reported $200 million deal. Now, this is a relatively small deal.
It is small. Mm-hmm. It is small, but strategically important, right? Because they're acquiring the capabilities to look at non-human identities. So that's, and also credential security solutions. So, given the FortiBleed other news story that we're going to talk about and the credential security issues in that one, it's relevant. It was a good M&A story to pull out, Rory. I appreciate it. SailPoint acquiring NHI, it is the right timing to bring on NHI. There are a lot of small startups looking at how to solve the non-human identity issue or problem. So good for them.
Yeah, and that's the positive, folks. And I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but if we look at SailPoint, on the surface that looks great, but SailPoint has kind of had a little bit of a checkered past. It returned. It was privately owned. It returned to public in an IPO in early 2025. There seemed to be some, positive momentum from its stock, growing investor confidence, but it hasn't been plain sailing since then. If we look at the company, its revenue for financial year 2026 was just over a $1 billion, which is a 24% increase year over year. Yeah, that's pretty good. The company's been around since 2005. Yeah, unfortunately, its stock price has declined 45% over the last year. And if we look at the last 5 years, it's down 47%. And you might think, well, what the heck is going on? Unfortunately, its Q1 2027 earnings report highlighted things like decelerating growth forecasts. Some of the firms like Scotiabank and RBC Capital had, called their price targets lower. Issues with unprofitability, and then there was a bunch of insider share sales by their CEO, Mark McLean. So it doesn't sound good.
Those last two things really worry me. And the number that Mr. McLean sold was 341,000 shares. That is big. And the unprofitability, there's something amiss. Something is not working. The other thing I would look at is that in their series of acquisitions that they've had over the last 11 years, they've made 9. They've been chasing the market a bit, I think. What do you think, Rory?
Yeah, they have. I think you used a good expression in our first recording of this. It wasn't recording, which was they've spent quite a lot of money on chasing the puck. I think that's a good expression. In other words, they spent well over $400 million since 2015 buying a bunch of little companies, for real-time ITDR, for PAM, for SaaS governance. But I think you put it quite well when you said that they seem to be buying things after the point when they should have bought them. In other words, they should have made those investments earlier in the cycle of the development of those of that technology, right?
Yeah, when you're buying cloud access governance in 2019, you've missed it by about a decade.
Yeah.
When you're buying PAM capabilities in 2023, why did you decide to get into PAM in 2023 when it was something that companies were looking at a decade earlier or longer? It could be strategic that they did it that way. I would say the reason why I said it's right timing for NHI is because it's current today and necessary today. So it's very possible that Entro is hitting the puck at the right time, to continue that metaphor.
Yeah.
So here's sort of my net. I hope they're getting the engine running. I hope that they are integrating well with Entro as they bring that in, and that they will see profitability as they go forward. My concern or thinking is that they might be setting themselves up for possible acquisition.
Right.
And I said this in our earlier chat, right, that when you see all of the pieces falling into place that we're seeing, the stock price decline it's persistent over 5 years, the unprofitability, the small acquisitions that were kind of throwing money after the fact, trying to join a market when they should have joined it earlier, in my opinion. Sometimes they're trying to modernize and look like a company that has everything running smoothly and has everything they need today in order to be sold. My concern is that a Palo Alto has just bought CyberArk, and others like CrowdStrike have bought Identity. SailPoint is not yet in the position to be acquired, and who's left to do the acquiring? I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, no, there is something rotten. There's something rotten in the state of Denmark, and hopefully...
And it's not cheese.
No. I'm quoting my Shakespeare there, so there we go.
Yes, you are.
Well, let's look at the next story, Christina, which has been all over the news this week, and it's called 40 Bleed, which isn't really a bleed, but we'll go with it. It's basically a sweeping credential harvesting heist compromising over 30,000 Fortinet devices.
Huge. Yeah. It's huge. And poor Fortinet. I mean, it wasn't even there wasn't anything misconfigured or vulnerable coding. It wasn't their fault.
No, no, there was no, and that's it. We'd really like to emphasize that, folks, that and SOC Radar, who initially found this, the researchers there emphasized no exploited Fortinet flaws in the operation. It was strictly a credential compromise campaign. Having said that, it's vast. Attackers targeting various sectors across nearly 200 countries, compiled a list of working credentials for over 30,000 devices, and they called it FortiBleed, but it's not really, that's probably not the best name for it. Where is it coming from? It's probably, SOC Radar believes it's a suspected Russian-speaking threat to actors. It gave, visibility into tooling, victim database, automation infrastructure, verified credential repository, and so on. Unless you wanted to say more about this, Christina, but there was a really interesting quote from a chap called Wasim Ahmed, is a head of engineering at secure.com, and he was telling this to the reporter at Dark Reading. He says, the most striking thing about this is what's missing from it. So there's no 0-day, no exploit, no actual bleed, right? It isn't a vulnerability, in other words, as they say, but a pile of credentials leaked in earlier Fortinet breaches, but fired back at the organizations that never bothered to change them. So that's basically what it is. There you go. Go change them,
Go change them. It's it's hygiene. And we've harped on this throughout, the year and a half we've been doing Cyber Sidekicks. It's hard. We know it's hard. It takes time. It's the coordination between IT and security that are, it's difficult, right? Because you have to make sure that you're working in lockstep and that you're changing those credentials. So anyway. We feel you when we say we know it's hard, but still, go change the credentials.
Yeah, go change the credentials, folks. So our special guest this week is Brandon Dobreck, VP of Product at SecurityScorecard. Hey, Brandon, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Rory, thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And as we mentioned at the beginning, we're always good to have a chat with folk who are been on the vendor side, but also as a practitioner. And I know you've been both. Mm-hmm. So it's always great to get your perspective on what's happening in the world.
Yeah, and so to that end, we like to ask our softball questions. Sorry, I cut you off, Brandon. But we love to jump in with, just what keeps you up at night. And it could be, we had one person say, well, my 3-month-old. They're like, oh, okay, we're going to talk babies in this episode.
Yeah, and I usually end up talking about my cats at some point because they're a threat to lots of things. So yeah,
they are.
So what's on your mind?
At some point here, I will talk about my dog, so we can go into that one as well.
Oh, perfect.
But and honestly, and heavily framed by what I'm doing and what I'm seeing of the world right now. But third-party risk has been the big thing, or supply chain risk has been the big thing keeping me up at night lately. And the latest version of Verizon DBIR came out a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Is one of my favorites, and was one of those ones where yet again, breaches from third-party risk doubled year over year, right? Mm-hmm. I guess it was a 60% jump, but breaches went up so much that it was effectively doubling. And it seems like every week there's an attack coming through, targeting enterprises through their vendors and through their supply chain. So yeah, that's been my recent nightmare.
I think to frame it historically, I always go back to 2014. Mm-hmm. And I know you know what I'm talking about when, there was an attack at a very large American retailer into their POS system through their HVAC.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was the first real eye-opening across the industry of why your suppliers matter, why looking at their risk posture matters. Mm-hmm. Right?
It's funny, actually. I have this conversation all the time, and I use that exact story. I'm like, hey, 12 years ago, it blew our minds. right? Like I can't speak for you. Like I was like, this is the most interesting, coolest thing. And now I'm like numb to it because it just keeps happening.
It's got to the stage now where, and I know I've talked a lot about this, we've covered this in the show quite a bit, Brandon, some of the big supply chain infiltrations that have happened, like Jaguar Land Rover, for instance, in the UK. I'm sure you probably were aware of that. We covered that when it happened last year. The implications are unbelievable. In that case, it was a 1.6 billion loan they had to get from the UK government, who can't really afford that, as you probably know, now that we're on our 7th Prime Minister in 10 years. We don't have that kind of money. But what do you think are the kind of causes? I mean, we have at least a good idea of what's behind that, but where is this coming from, the development of this increase in third-party risk?
Well, it's these environments, these tools, etc., are often one they're like horizontally exploding massively, right? I have somebody who I was talking to who was like, hey, we went from 10,000 vendors to almost 80,000 vendors in a 5-year period.
Wow.
And the resourcing of the teams is not keeping up, right? And so you're only actually able to look at something on the order of half of your vendors, right? I saw a survey recently that was 22% of the people in the survey said that they were looking at more than half their vendors. And so you have people who have like primary access to your network, whether it's through VPN UTM, whether it's through SFTP, whether it's through being contractors who can come directly into your environment. The landscape is too large for you to check against.
Yep.
And threat actors, nation states, ransomware groups, et cetera, have kind of turned their eyes to these because they're like, well, the cost to compromise the enterprise is much, much harder than to compromise a small tech shop where IT and security is the same thing.
Yeah.
There's a second piece that goes along with it as well, which is, in most cases, third-party risk is not necessarily a security function, although third-party cyber risk is really emergent, but it's a risk function, a compliance function. It's checking the regulatory box. And in that case, where it still predominantly runs through questionnaires and attestation, it's kind of asking people to grade their own homework, where they are incentivized to give you the answers that you want to hear because that's how they sell. And so there's like this confluence of the size of the attack surface, the depth of tooling and control you have over the environment, and the fact that it runs through spreadsheets and questionnaires and things like that are creating a landscape for compromise.
Yeah. That was one of the best explanations I've heard, Brandon, of the challenges around supply chain management. You brought in so many different pieces, and the one that I especially like at the moment is that it's not a security function or hasn't historically been a security function. Definitely has a security implication.
Yeah.
And so what would you say is the biggest pain point? You've called out how the third-party vendor wants to give you, the right answer in order to get the business with you. That was a wonderful thing to call out. But if they could be transparent and honest for the benefit of all, how do we make it easy for them to do that? What are some of the advances in risk management and TPRM especially that might help these smaller vendors onboard in a way that is transparent and useful to the larger partner?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of three pieces, right? It's people, it's process, and it's teams. Or tools, rather. Oftentimes, they're limited on the people front, and so the best places to close the gap are on tools and are on standardization of processes. I think we're seeing really interesting things where, some of the most mature companies are kind of setting the standard for what you can do, and they're marrying their threat intelligence function and their security function and their GRC function together in third-party cyber risk and bringing those threat-informed views, right? The idea of like, hey, the business context, but also like, what's the threat landscape? How do I take like what is traditionally outside-in views and apply those to the questionnaire responses to see if there are gaps between what's attested to and what evidence shows?
So more context is being used from a vulnerability or exposure standpoint.
Yeah, that is a great way of putting it. It's funny actually because you say from a vulnerability or exposure standpoint, it's actually very similar to what we saw in exposure management over the last 5 or so years here of we were really good at finding vulnerabilities. We weren't really great at telling you what the right ones to fix that were going to materially reduce risk. And there's been a heavy focus on that. And a bunch of great companies have come out solving that problem. And I think you're seeing a very similar behavior and pattern in third-party risk right now of like, how do you give the context necessary to make informed decisions?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that had been on my mind relating to that, and I know after some of the attacks from last year on the retail, automotive side and whatever, one of the questions that tends to come up as well, why not just have zero access to our network at all for anybody, which obviously just couldn't work, because how on earth do you work with that? But some of the larger of the network providers or the network service providers would say, well, it should only be done on a specific application use or an app pool or call request or whatever. I mean, the first option is kind of the nuclear option, right? The second option can be done at the network level, but I guess for most companies, that's not really workable, right?
No, and I find in practice, it tends to break down. Right. Because there's the constant balance between security and business flow. I don't know if you remember, old Cisco commercials where it was a security guy and an IT guy in couples therapy. And it was the balance between I want to close the gaps and I want to protect us and I want to enable free flow of business. I find in practice those competing priorities, are constantly causing issues. With the best will in the world, we try and limit access. Oh, you can only have access to this network segment or this block or this application, etc. But it tends to break down in the reality of modern businesses.
One thing we haven't talked about, and
don't do it. Don't do it. I know where you're going.
Well,
I feel like we have to talk about it. Actually.
Yeah.
He knows what it is.
He knows what it is. So I'll say it. I don't mind being the bad one. So AI. 90% of our guests end up talking about it anyway. A year ago, it was maybe 30 or 40%. 18 months ago, it was, less than that. That's the reality.
And I love that Brandon didn't bring it up at all.
Extra
That's
points.
Beautiful.
Extra points, Brandon. But given that we can't avoid it, how has AI, we're talking particularly about agentic AI, affected the way you see the market has developed, in your view?
Yeah. So it's funny, actually. In a lot of ways, agents are just extension of your vendor landscape. So that's a part that contributes to the worry I have about third-party risk, right? And what are they doing? What tools do they have access to? When you give them non-deterministic paths that they need to go down, what are they going to break in order to accomplish that? How do we gate them? How do we have an understanding of them? So on the one side, as an expansion of the threat landscape, they are kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
But the balance of that is like all of the great things that they can do. I talked about the limited resourcing within third-party risk management. I talked about sort of the need to bring context together and to wire these things together. Like that's where the application of agents swarm and handle rote capabilities for you or specialized capabilities for you, honestly. Like, is it highly time consuming? Is it highly repetitive? Does it have a knowledge gap? Those are all cases where you can apply agents to fix things for you. I'll also say, you got to talk about it. It's the flip side of this is mythos, right? And mythos rather. And what does this look like in a post-mythos world? And it's a lot of the same problems that we've traditionally had, right? It condenses the time to compromise, it condenses the time to discovery, and it scales the number of things that we've discovered. Yep. And the only way that we really keep up with that rate of expanded attack surface, expanded coverage, et cetera, is through the judicious application of AI as a means to combat it. And so, I think on both sides, it's really interesting, right? Like what it means from an attack surface standpoint, but also how we can arm defenders through it to actually try and keep up with the problems that are in it, try and help them handle the stuff that is handleable. That way people can focus on the high skill or the complex problems.
I was just going to say that old fashioned phrase, use a thief to catch a thief, always comes to mind when we're looking at that.
I think it's such early days and we are running so fast with AI that we don't know we don't know what we don't know. So similar to the Target breach that we just talked about earlier in our chat here, we don't know how an agent will accidentally open a port, spin up a service, create a whole new company, those non-deterministic things that you talked about, or identity, in order to then open the door to the attacker. That's probably what, for me, crystallizes my insomnia about agents.
Yeah, and it's you said something there. We don't know what we don't know. That's a really good point, right? Because security guy was doing some bug bounty programs, was playing around with an application, was parsing out the headers, found that they were actually using a third-party AI within it. Like, okay, how are they actually doing this? Turns out that it was not well protected or well authenticated, was able to cross-authenticate to it. Then you start pinging it and going, okay, like what tools actually within this application does it have access to? What can it do? How can it do it? And don't know that the folks who were using the tool or configuring the tool sort of had that full view.
That's the scary part.
Yeah, those unknown unknowns are where that is the scary part. And like just the overall landscape as well, right? Like the way that I see AI, the way that my team uses it, the way that people in the broader market use it is wildly different today than it was 6 months ago, and no idea where it's going to be 6 months from now.
Exactly. Well, I think we've covered everything we could cover. And so we could probably keep talking for another hour and a half. Brandon, it's been really fun to chat with you. And in the interest of time, we will go ahead and thank you so much for your time and joining us. And it was a really interesting discussion. And please come back and visit us again.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Great. Well, thanks for the great discussion, Christina, about those various news stories. And also before that, of course, folks, we had a really good discussion with Brandon from SecurityScorecard. That was great. We enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was lovely. Thank you so much again, Brandon, for coming on. You know, it's always good to get a little dose of IT and security therapy, which he talked about. Mm-hmm. So that's one to that's one to review in our organizations. How are they getting along?
Yeah, exactly. So then we should probably wrap the show, Christina. What do we have on next week?
Yeah. Well, you know, we've had all of these discussions about Project Glasswing and Daybreak. And so we've invited Jayesh Kamat, who is the global competency leader in the application security group at IBM, to come chat with us about why do we need these projects with Anthropic or OpenAI? And why would a company like IBM jump into these projects to look at Mythos or the more advanced models that are coming out? And then also how application security services can help. And so he's going to educate us and our listeners about the why and wherefore of these, you know, these crazy new capabilities that Mythos brings to bear and others, and why we need to be ready for them and how we get ourselves prepared.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. Stay tuned for that.
Definitely. Very hot topic. Very much people are still talking about it. I know some people have said, oh, well, you know, Mythos, frontier rules, blah, 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 blah. But actually, the reality is it is still an important topic that we must talk about. So,
yeah, we must. That's
for next week. And if you folks would like to get in touch with us, we'd very much like to hear from you. You can get in touch with us through email. So that would be through me, Rory, at richmondadvisorygroup.com, or...
Yeah, and you can find me at Christina at richmondadvisorygroup.com, or if you just want to talk to our bots, you can email info at richmondadvisorygroup.com.
Great. Thanks, folks. Appreciate you joining us, and we hope you can tune in again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.